Imagine giving everything to someone only for them to walk out on you at your lowest point. That was my reality. I thought I had a solid marriage and shared dreams of a family. But life had other plans, and when we found out I couldn't have children naturally, everything changed. She grew distant, colder, until one day she was simply gone. No explanation, just a hollow space where she used to be. I spent years rebuilding myself, finding strength I didn't know I had. Then, out of nowhere, she showed up with a baby in her arms, asking for a second chance. What would you do? After years of healing, would you take her back? Or choose your own happiness and walk away for good? I truly believed our marriage was solid, like a rock. Night after night, we dreamed together about a future that felt so real. We talk about a home filled with laughter, children running around the yard, and us watching with pride as those dreams took shape. There was a sense of satisfaction in these small fantasies, a kind of happiness that came from shared intentions and knowing we wanted the same things. But sometimes, life is a way of throwing us curveballs we never saw coming. After several disappointing attempts, the truth came out. I couldn't have children naturally. It felt like a punch in the gut, one that makes you question everything. When we got the news, I thought we'd face it together, that our bond would be enough to weather the storm. But in the weeks that followed, I could sense a shift, a small crack in the foundation. She started pulling away, saying less, her words growing colder, more detached. At first, I tried to ignore it, brushing it off as her way of coping. Maybe she was just as hurt as I was, I thought, and didn't know how to express it. But over time, her behavior felt different, pointed, almost as if she resented me. And still, I stayed quiet, afraid to dig too deep and find something I couldn't handle. We carried on like that for a while, going through the motions, trying to keep up appearances. But every day, I felt a bit of the connection we'd once had slip away. It was as though all our intentions to build a life together had faded. I began to wonder if our dream had always been a shared one, or if I'd been the only one holding on to it so tightly. It wasn't long after the news that I started noticing more than just distance. She seemed to have this edge to her, quiet criticism slipping out, a sigh here, an eye roll there. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, being overly sensitive. But soon, it felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. Our home, which used to feel so full of warmth and shared intentions, grew cold. I could sense she was dissatisfied, but every time I tried to talk, she'd brush me off, leaving me feeling more lost than before. Her behavior became even harder to ignore. She'd stay out later, finding reasons to avoid time together. And when she was home, she acted like I was in the way, like every little thing I did reminded her of what we'd lost. The satisfaction of just being around each other was gone. Sometimes, I'd catch her looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite place, something that made me question whether I even knew her anymore. And despite the doubts creeping in, I still tried to be there, not wanting to seem insecure or push her away further. I tried everything I could think of, dinners, thoughtful gestures, anything to bridge the gap. But no matter what I did, it only seemed to make things worse, like she was actively trying to distance herself. There was this growing sense that she had her own intentions, something I wasn't part of. I began to wonder if I was losing her, if maybe she was searching for something I couldn't give. Moving on to topic 3, mysterious trip. Then one day, out of the blue, she told me she was going on a trip with friends. It felt sudden, unplanned, but I didn't want to seem suspicious, so I kept my questions to myself. She packed her bags quickly, hardly looking me in the eye as she did. I remember trying to say goodbye, trying to hold on to a sense of normalcy, but the way she left, like she was relieved to be gone, left me uneasy. Still, I convinced myself it was just a break, some time apart to clear her mind. We all need that sometimes, don't we? The days went by, and I waited to hear from her. I sent messages, tried to call. Nothing. Radio silence. My patience began to fray as each day dragged on without a single word. Something felt off, like a dark cloud hanging over me. Finally, my worry got the best of me, and I reached out to one of her friends. My stomach twisted as I learned the truth. she wasn't with them. The satisfaction I'd once felt in trusting her shattered in that instant, leaving me reeling with doubt and confusion. It was a hard pill to swallow, realizing she'd lied to me, that she'd left with no intention of being found. I didn't know if it was anger or hurt that took over, but I felt a surge of something powerful, something that told me things would never be the same. I wanted answers, but with each call that went unanswered, I felt myself slipping further into frustration. Days turned into weeks, and each one felt like an eternity. She'd simply vanished, leaving me without a single answer. I searched for signs, checked her usual spots, even reached out to her family, hoping they might know something. But they were just as confused as I was. No notes, no explanations, just an empty space where she used to be. The satisfaction I once felt in our bond was replaced by a hollow ache, and I kept wondering, what had I done to deserve this silence, this abandonment? The questions kept me up at night. Every memory, every shared intention, now felt like a painful reminder of what I'd lost. Friends and family tried to reach out, but their words of comfort didn't stick. How could they understand the weight of this emptiness, the frustration that came from trying to fill in the blanks she'd left behind? Therapy became my last resort, a place where I could spill the hurt without fear of judgment. I needed answers, but it seemed like all I could do was try to find my footing again. In therapy, I started peeling back the layers of my own pain, trying to find satisfaction in small victories, getting through a day, a week, without the constant ache. There were moments when I felt like I was finally making progress, that I was slowly rebuilding myself. But even as I found strength, a part of me still longed for closure. She'd left without warning, without a single word, and in the silence, I was left to pick up the pieces alone. With time, I started to pull myself together, focusing on what was left rather than what was gone. I reached out to old friends, rediscovering connections I'd let slip. I felt a strange satisfaction in their company, a reminder that there was life beyond my pain. Little by little, I began to find joy again, simple things like laughing at an old joke or sharing a quiet drink. Each day felt like a small victory, a reminder that I could keep moving forward. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, a place where I could finally explore who I was beyond the heartbreak. I set new intentions, focusing on growth, healing, finding satisfaction in rediscovering myself. It wasn't easy. Some days, the memories would creep back, and I'd feel that familiar ache. But gradually, I found strength in letting go. I learned that even though she'd left me without answers, I could still find closure on my own terms. As I grew stronger, I felt a kind of peace settle in, a sense of independence I hadn't known before. I was no longer just the person who'd been abandoned. I was building a new life on my own terms. Slowly, satisfaction returned to my days, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Years had passed, and I was finally at peace with the life I'd built alone. So when I heard a knock on the door one evening, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. There she was, standing with a baby in her arms. My heart skipped, caught between shock and an old, familiar ache. She spoke softly, as if testing the waters, telling me she'd made a mistake, that she wanted to come back. She'd left for another man, she admitted, only to be abandoned herself, left to pick up her own pieces. Her words hung in the air, stirring up emotions I thought I'd buried. She spoke of regret, of intentions to mend what she'd shattered, of satisfaction she'd once taken for granted. She wanted forgiveness, a second chance, her eyes pleading with a vulnerability I'd never seen before. And yet, as I looked at her and the child in her arms, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything I'd endured, all that I'd rebuilt without her. She was a stranger now, her return stirring old wounds I'd worked so hard to heal. There was a time when I would have given anything to have her back, to find satisfaction in her love again. But now I felt torn, unsure if I could simply welcome her back, as if nothing had happened. She wanted us to start over, to be a family again, but I knew there was no going back to the way things were. Her intentions might be genuine, but I wasn't the same man she'd left behind. As we sat across from each other, a silence filled the space between us. I could see the desperation in her eyes, a glimmer of hope that I might take her back. But after everything she'd put me through, my heart was steady, my intentions clear. I'd spent years healing from the hurt she'd caused, and while I could see her regret, I wasn't willing to reopen those wounds. She asked for forgiveness, her voice soft, but her request felt hollow, as if simply saying it could erase the pain she'd left behind. I reminded her of all those lonely nights, the unanswered questions, the suffering I'd endured alone. I wanted her to understand the weight of her actions, the satisfaction I'd worked so hard to rebuild. She tried to shift the blame, subtly, as if I could have somehow done more to keep her from leaving. But I wasn't about to be pulled into that trap. I knew where I stood. I had finally found my peace, and I wasn't about to sacrifice it for a past that had only brought me pain. With a calm I hadn't expected, I told her no. I told her that I'd moved on, that I'd found satisfaction in my own strength and independence. Her face fell, a mixture of shock and sorrow, but I felt a strange relief. This was my choice, my final decision. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, knowing I'd chosen my own happiness over a love that had left me shattered. After that last conversation, her family reached out, hoping I'd reconsider, thinking I might change my mind with time. They pleaded, said she was truly remorseful, that she needed support. But I'd made my decision. For so long, I'd lived with the weight of her choices, and now I'd finally set myself free. I explained to her family that while I wished her the best, my intentions were firm. I wouldn't reopen that chapter. I was done sacrificing my own satisfaction, my own peace, for someone who'd left me when I was at my most vulnerable. Each attempt from her side, each call, only reinforced my resolve. I'd come to value the life I'd built without her, a life full of purpose and fulfillment. Looking back, I could see just how much I'd grown, how those painful moments had pushed me to find strength I hadn't known I possessed. It wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about honoring the journey I'd been on and the man I'd become. As I set those boundaries, a sense of calm washed over me. I was satisfied with my choice, confident in my ability to move forward without looking back. I'd reclaimed my independence, chosen my happiness, and now my path was clear. For the first time, I felt fully in control of my life, and nothing had ever felt better. After that last conversation, her family reached out, hoping I'd reconsider, thinking I might change my mind with time. They pleaded, said she was truly remorseful, that she needed support. But I'd made my decision. For so long, I'd lived with the weight of her choices, and now I'd finally set myself free. I explained to her family that while I wished her the best, my intentions were firm. I wouldn't reopen that chapter. I was done sacrificing my own satisfaction, my own peace, for someone who'd left me when I was at my most vulnerable. Each attempt from her side, each call, only reinforced my resolve. I'd come to value the life I'd built without her, a life full of purpose and fulfillment. Looking back, I could see just how much I'd grown, how those painful moments had pushed me to find strength I hadn't known I possessed. It wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about honoring the journey I'd been on and the man I'd become. As I set those boundaries, a sense of calm washed over me. I was satisfied with my choice, confident in my ability to move forward without looking back. I'd reclaimed my independence, chosen my happiness, and now my path was clear. For the first time, I felt fully in control of my life, and nothing had ever felt better. After that last conversation, her family reached out, hoping I'd reconsider, thinking I might change my mind with time. They pleaded, said she was truly remorseful, that she needed support. But I'd made my decision. For so long, I'd lived with the weight of her choices, and now I'd finally set myself free. I explained to her family that while I wished her the best, my intentions were firm. I wouldn't reopen that chapter. I was done sacrificing my own satisfaction, my own peace, for someone who'd left me when I was at my most vulnerable. Each attempt from her side, each call, only reinforced my resolve. I'd come to value the life I'd built without her, a life full of purpose and fulfillment. Looking back, I could see just how much I'd grown, how those painful moments had pushed me to find strength I hadn't known I possessed. It wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about honoring the journey I'd been on and the man I'd become. As I set those boundaries, a sense of calm washed over me. I was satisfied with my choice, confident in my ability to move forward without looking back. I'd reclaimed my independence, chosen my happiness, and now my path was clear. For the first time, I felt fully in control of my life, and nothing had ever felt better.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.